here for the Hobby Organist channel, sitting in front of this amazing Grand Marquis we're very lucky to have here in our studio today. Thank you everybody's comments from yesterday. I think, fingers crossed, we are getting there with the sound. We're getting a direct feed from the organ. We've got a microphone that seems to work on me talking, so you can hear me clearly, hopefully. And so I think we're getting there with the technology, and then we can concentrate on the organs and the lessons and so forth. Again, thank you very much to everybody who's already signed up on Patreon. A lot of people are asking, just to clarify, that the important thing about signing up to Patreon for Monday, which is not very far away now, about 4 days away, is that unless you sign up, all the stuff that's already here on the channel you won't be able to see. And I was amazed yesterday. I started the process of transferring all the stuff over, and I think there's about 70 videos, so it's worth signing up just to retain access to this incredible library that we've built up, all about Lowrey organs. It's amazing, and organs in general, this like a repository of knowledge, as it were. It's fantastic. If you watched them all back to back, you'd be sitting there for more than one day. There's more than 24 hours worth of videos to watch. So thank you everybody that's signed up already. If you need help signing up, give us a shout. Remember, on Monday, everybody that signed up will get the free copy of the Even When sheet music, and we'll do a little masterclass on how to play that on various Lowrey organs. So, as I said, I'm sitting here in front of a Grand Marquis. Somebody asked a very pertinent question actually after that video today. He said, what is a Grand Marquis? Well, in short, a Grand Marquis is the special edition. It's the limited edition version of the Marquis. So maybe tomorrow we'll do another video and we'll just go through the differences between this and a regular Marquis, because there's quite a few amazing things. And in fact, one of the styles that we opened up on there, a style called light guitar, you only find that on the Grand Marquis and the Aria. The Grand Marquis and the Aria share lots of things in common, and so a lot of the additional things that got added onto this organ found their way onto the Aria. But we'll do that in a bit more detail tomorrow. Time machine. So we'll do maybe a bit more in depth about the Grand Marquis tomorrow. But that opening number, actually, by the way, another little challenge for you, see if anybody can remember that. I apologise for the mistakes in there. I haven't played that tune for a while, but it came into my head when I saw that style. It's a TV theme, I think from the 80s again, or maybe it might be the 90s. I'm sure somebody will know, but see if you can remember that theme. I'd be surprised if anybody in America gets that, because probably they didn't have that show in America. But hopefully somebody in the UK will remember that. I certainly remember it from my childhood, because, again, this is me reminiscing, but do you remember the days when actually TV themes were so recognisable and such great melodies that you actually wanted to play them? I can't think of many TV themes nowadays that I can even remember, let alone ones that I wanted the music for. I remember when I was a child, I used to spend a fortune buying all this sheet music, because a song would come out and I desperately want to play it and have to get sheet music and learn to play it. Because a lot of people have asked whether or not I play by ear, but I don't play by ear at all. I can't play by ear, I'm not blessed that way. So everything I play is stuff that I've memorised and play from memory. And a lot of the time I can't remember, so I have music books as well to remind me. But anyway, going off topic, what we're going to talk about today. Today actually is a very simple one, because a question that came up yesterday when somebody was looking at the video for this organ is they obviously noticed that we have all the flute tabs over here. Remember yesterday we were talking about the flute tabs, and they said, well, on their organ, which I think was a Stardust, they had some yellow tabs as well. And they wanted to know, well, what they for. They labelled strings, and they said, well, they didn't really sound much like strings. So I thought just a little short video today just to explain about what's called the Ensemble section. Now, because we're sitting at an E-series organ, the Grand Marquis, those tabs don't exist. They would normally be as part of the rail. So if you're sitting at an A-series organ or an SU, alongside the flutes, there would be these extra tabs. Now, on this organ, to fit in this massive screen, they had to take away some of the tabs, so they put these tabs on the screen. So if you can imagine that these tabs are over here, if you're on an A series on SU, but here on the E series they're here on the screen, and they work just like normal tabs, they're pictured like ones, and they have little lights above them as well. And they're labelled as upper and lower ensemble, and they are additional tabs, so they're tabs that are mixed in with the sound from the organ tabs, and they are turned off and on, as all the tabs are, by their own master button there. Again, this button is alongside the tabs here if you've got an A series and SU organ there in the middle. So let's hear what they sound like. Let's just turn off everything and go back to square one. So there you go, basic organ sound. I'm actually just going to turn off the flutes. It's surprising, actually, that's a very important point. When we're talking about exploring sound sometimes and seeing what they sound like and doing a bit of research, as it were, it's always best to start with nothing. So you know that you've got like a blank canvas, and so you know the things that you're adding in, then you can hear the difference that they're making. If you start with the organ sound already there, then it's very difficult for you to pick out what you're doing. A lot of people, when they say, oh, I'll put a piano sound on, but I can't hear it, well, that's normally because they've still got the flute sound on, so it's drowning it out and they've just merged together. So I always like to take the tabs off, and then I know we're starting from scratch. And so I can have a go at bringing these ensemble voices in. There's a string 8. Now, that really doesn't sound much like an orchestral string or a Mantovani string. You really wouldn't find yourself doing a lovely with that sound. However, actually, funnily enough, 70 years ago, you would have played your Mantovani with that sound, because, to be perfectly honest, that's as good as the strings got back then, because all the sounds had to be synthesized and made up. That was as realistic as strings got, and Lowrey called them the symphonic strings. It was a big deal, and everybody thought they were amazing. Of course, nowadays, compared to the modern sample digital voicing that we have, that doesn't really sound much like a string orchestra. Not really helping with the way I play. And that's why, so the question is, well, why are they still here? If they're not as good as the strings that you find in your orchestral section, and you're not going to use them to play Mantovani, why are they still there? Well, I think there's lots of different answers to that. My belief, my rationale for them being there, is because even though they're not a fantastically realistic sound, they are a very interesting and useful sound to use on the organ. And I think we tend to, on a lot of keyboards nowadays, and a lot of manufacturers are so obsessed with every sound has to be as realistic as possible and has to be a recreation of whatever, as perfect as possible. And we forget that actually we just made some nice sounds in the past, and it's nice just to use them again. And again, I feel that when you have organ tabs here, these organ flutes, and you mix in the digital orchestral voicing, that you kind of almost have a little bit of a mismatch there, because you've got this very traditional organ sound that is very clearly a made up sound, and then you've layered on top of it these very authentic orchestral strings, and sometimes I feel that they don't really marry up very well together. Whereas these strings on their own, yes, they do sound quite not very impressive, but they are still a very nice voice to mix in with the regular flutes, to give the flutes some character and a different kind of tone, and that's where I would think of using them. So I wouldn't really set up a registration where I'm using them on my own. I wouldn't. No, I wouldn't really do that. But what I would do is take an organ registration. So now let's bring the flutes back in, add a little bit of sustain. Now if I wanted to zing that up a little bit and give it a little bit more life, I could bring in this ensemble voice. Let's add a little bit of sustain to it. And I think that's a very nice sound. It doesn't sound like Mantovani, it doesn't sound like James Last, it doesn't sound like a symphonic orchestra, but it's a nice organ sound. And that's sometimes, I keep saying this, we lose sight of the fact that it doesn't matter, it doesn't sound like anything, it's a nice sound for us to play. And as I said, I think that they're there to mix in with the organ sounds. Well, the kind of clue is also in the fact that they've got footage names on them, 16, 8 and 4. And so just like regular organ footage, and I'm sure we've already done a video where we talk about the way that these footages work, but it's the same with here, that the 8 foot is pitched in the middle, 4 foot is an octave higher, and you can probably guess the 16 foot is an octave lower. So actually when you do mix them together, you are playing these notes, and these notes all at the same time. It's quite a big sound. Let's just hear that. So if we play, just say the 8 foot in the middle, when I add the 4, you can hear it's adding that note up there. And when I add the 16, you can hear it's adding a note down there. So when I'm playing one note, I'm actually playing 3 different notes. And likewise, if I play 3 notes, I'm playing 9. I'm playing those notes, and these notes up here. So actually it's a big sound. Bring in the flutes with that as well. That's quite effective. It's a nice sound. We also use them when we want to add some zing to our theatre organ registrations. So when we're putting together a theatre organ registration, let's change our flute type. We go to say tibia or diapason, and we're doing a theatre organ type registration. We'll add some zing to our theatre organ to bring those strings in. So the fact that they're not the biggest, fattest, realistic sound it doesn't make them any less useful. In fact, sometimes I think it can make them more interesting. And we're going to talk about this in a lot of videos in the future, is when we're looking at blending and combining sounds. I always like to compare it to cooking, or mixing paint, or anything where you're blending things together. So if you're blending together flavours when you're doing the cooking, you don't want to have everything being a big, bold flavour, because otherwise you just end up with too much. It's overwhelming. So sometimes you need something that's bold, but it needs to be surrounded by things that are a bit more subtle. I'd say if you're blending paint, if you were adding all your different colours together and you suddenly added a load of black paint to it, all you're going to end up with grey. It's not going to have any definition, it's going to be too much. And so sometimes when we're mixing sounds together and blending registrations, it's important to think about not having too much going on, trying to have like a spectrum of sound really, where you don't have all these big fat voices that are just piled on top of each other, that you have voices that maybe sit here, some sit here, some sit here. So when they're put together, it's not so overwhelming. And that's what orchestra arrangers do, and orchestras. You listen to orchestra, they're playing in different ranges, and they're not all big fat sounds, so it doesn't all clash. You think how many musicians are all playing an orchestra, but you can still pick out all the different sections. And that's what we ought to try and achieve sometimes with the organ. So a voice that isn't big and impressive on its own isn't necessarily a bad voice. It can be there to blend and build up and be part of a registration. And we have these 2 string buttons, tabs for the lower manual as well. And again, they're very handy if you're just sitting there with the organ sound in your left hand, which is nice, put a little bit of sustain on it. And you'll try just a little bit, something to that. See the 4 foot or the 8. Just gives it a bit. So that's the video for today, and that's the fault for today. Is this, and it's kind of been actually a lot longer than I was expecting to. Is that these voices here, say these strings, yes, they're not the most fantastic voicing in the world. And in fact, if we're sitting here at a grand marquee and I was doing this instead at a Stardust or a Royale, an SU series organ or a Prestige, essentially they're all going to sound the same. So it makes no difference which organ you're sitting at, because it's recreating a much older sound from the 70s that predates all these instruments. So that's not to say that because I'm playing this on the Grand Marquis it sounds any better than on the Sensation, because it's the same voicing essentially. And so that's a nice tip that anybody that really has one of the organs that has tabs that you can bring in those strings, just to think about them. Don't just ignore them. They can be something you can add to blend in. Okay. Hope that makes sense. I think that's going to be my catchphrase, isn't it? I hope that makes sense. If you've got any questions, email. And we're already starting to get great suggestions coming in for future videos. Say the question we had actually yesterday was, what is a Grand Marquis? That's going to be the topic for the video tomorrow. And somebody's asked about using the sound shaper and talking about chords as well, more about the lock. So there's lots and lots of things for us to cover. So I will see you again tomorrow. I hope you've enjoyed this little video, and I hope my voice is nice and clear and you can hear what I'm saying. And tomorrow we'll be back and we'll do an explanation or an exploration of the fantabulous Grand Marquis. So bye bye, and I'll see you again tomorrow.